experience with Russian projects.
Kind words. I'm very glad to be here in this place. I hope you organize this every year so that I give me an excuse to be a speaker every year. It's kind of difficult to speak after so many distinguished speakers because whatever I want to speak has already been spoken. But anyway, I'll try. Especially Mr. Liu, I started my journey as a planner in the 1990s. Mr. Liu was my boss, and whatever I've learned whatever I know today, I have learned from him. So I speak after he spoke. I think there's nothing for me to speak again. But anyway, just a brief introduction. Jurong was one of the two institutions that started by the government in 1965 after we got our independence from Malaysia. Two fundamental issues the government was worried at that point in time. One was housing. That's why the HDB, which was mentioned by Mr. Liu, is responsible to create public housing throughout Singapore. Second is about job creation. That's why Jurong was created in 1965. We are responsible to create jobs through industrialization. So we have our long history starting 1965 to today. We have moved from what we call a labor-intensive industry in 65 to today what we call a knowledge-intensive industry in Singapore. As you know, Singapore is a small city-state. In fact, it's quite a diamond shape. And from the longest point in Singapore, east to west, it's only about 42 kilometers, which is, for you who are sportsmen, it's one marathon, that's all. So we have to move up the value chain all the time because we do not have natural resources. We have to keep ahead of the curve. Anyway, today I will try to share some of the things with you. I think I start with urban trends. I think these are things which we cannot ignore. Number one is population. Okay, population I think will increase to about 90 billion, in fact, in the next 40 years. And 2050 is estimated 70% of the world population will be concentrated in the city area. The second trend is this. Consumption, energy consumption is really great. Energy consumption will be 4 times. Water issue will be a problem. And also food intake will be triple from today. Contributing to GDP is important. Most of the country's GDP actually generated from the city area. And it's also, city is important as a gateway to the global economy. So these are important things that a city processes. That's why we have to relook into the whole concept of city. Urban fundamentals. I think one of the most important urban fundamentals is we have to know that city is people-oriented. So when we plan, the most important is about job creation. It's about putting food on the table for people in the city, and it's about shelter. But as we move ahead, rapid development without long-term planning, without proper planning, there are some consequences that we want to avoid. One, housing. Squatter area developed in certain countries. Environment degradation is another one, and congestion pollution. These are as a result of rapid development and without proper long-term planning. So what we want is actually a balanced development in the city itself. Housing demand, we have to address housing demand. We have to address conservation, and we have to also address the public transportation. In Singapore, we are aiming to have more and more people using the metro system because Singapore is just too small to allow the private ownership of cars. So we are into public transportation in a big way. Okay, people. City is supposed to be a magnet for people. Cities today are competing with global cities, your city, in fact, Singapore also, we are competing to attract talented people into the city because this is about boosting the economy through skills and professional people coming to the city. So what does that entail? It entails livability, it entails connectivity, it entails affordable, pleasant housing. These are fundamentals that you have to be, to create in a city environment. Next is the presence of social facilities, hospitals, schools, and all these things. And I think in the early years, in the 70s, when we are attracting the Japanese investors, we even go into what we call international schools, for Japanese international school in Singapore. The other thing is compactness. I think we are more and more looking at compact city. Compact city has given several advantages, of course. One is, of course, the facilities are all within walking distance. Walking, bicycle will be the mode of transportation. And increasingly, as you go up the value chain and you go up to what we call a knowledge-based economy, the face-to-face interaction is very important. So the more compact the city is, the higher chance of a face-to-face interaction. And of course, the last one is cost effectiveness. The cost per unit, for example, for infrastructure in a compact city is much, much less than a city which is sprawling, right? Infrastructure in terms of power, sewage, solid waste, and all that has to be there. Transportation network, alternative energy has to be looked into. Open space, urban lungs are important. Although it's expensive to have an urban lung in the urban areas, effort has to be made to propose urban lungs in around the city area. Lastly is what I call flexibility. We have to have pockets of reserve land in and around the city because this allows flexibility in uses. Because we cannot be 100% sure of the projected land uses in future. So, you have to have some reserve land to accommodate the users which you are not anticipating at this point in time. Blinding factor, the blinding factors is, I want to talk a bit on urban governance. I think the involvement of government is very important because it provides a framework for public participation, it provides a framework for public policy formulation. And also it's a referee. If there is any conflict between agencies, the government can come in as a referee. The other thing is, of course, sound institution. Sound institution has to be there to push things forward in terms of development. Lastly, urban development has to involve the public participation. And this is where the government can play a facilitator role or coordinating role to involve the public in urban planning. There is also a need to differentiate between public and private goods. Okay, certain goods, the government has to step in to be either the provider or the facilitator. Otherwise, if you expect the private sector to be involved and it's a non-profit generated project, it will never happen. I think for cities which are going the right direction or trying to go the right direction, we have to take little steps at a time. What are the little steps at a time? Probably you can start with planning a small community plan where the concept of live, work, and play is promoted. The other thing is also, I think you can sort of preserve some historical sites to start with. These are small envelopes of development that you can start to preserve. Of course, the other important developments, ports and airports. These are again smaller projects that you can kickstart any development. Lastly is of course the facilities, urban facilities that you can go with. Small urban facilities you can start with. Creation of public spaces is another not very expensive way to kickstart a pilot project to develop the city proper. Industrial site or industrial estate of 10, 15 hectares or even 20 hectares to kickstart also the city development. Okay, I think the key success factor for any city is be very sure of your positioning. How do you position your city in the global arena? Second takeaway, I think there is always a need for a city champion. For example, the mayor of city, the mayor of certain cities or the governor of cities. They have to be ambassadors to promote the city, to promote investment, things like that. There has to be a champion. And the last point I think we all need to be wary of is the balance between economic advancement and environment preservation. So that's all. Thank you very much. Spasiba.
Thank you, but let me bring you back to the Russian cases. Could you mention some experience of your company, some involvements to the Russian cities?
In Russia?
Yes.
Of course, we are a global company. It varies, countries' condition varies from country to country. So, for example, in Russia, we are involved in very narrow scope of industrial development. So for Russia, I think it's important for, not only Russia, I think it's important for countries around the world to set up what we call an economic engine or industrial park. Most importantly is, of course, positioning study. Knowing where you want to go 5 years from now, 10 years from now. Because when you do a proper positioning study, you know what are the sort of industries or the sort of economic activities you want to attract in the short term, medium and long term. Why I say short term is because some economic activities needs the input from your human resources, and human resource takes a while to develop. So your industries has to be in tandem with what I call human resource development. So that is the way to go, I think, as far as Russia is concerned. Thank you very much.